Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Doomer Optimism podcast. We haven't said it in a few episodes, but I'll say Patrick, my husband's line, it's a great day to be optimistic. We're here today with Sean Dixon-Sullivan, and I'm going to let Sean introduce himself, but I think it might be useful for me and Trace is here with us today to say a tiny bit about our own professional background, because I think it will be relevant for this conversation, because Sean's work is somewhat aligned with the work that you and I do professionally, Trace, and I thought that maybe we should start with that. So for those who don't know anything about what I do, I have this very small school in Uruguay called Rizoma Field School, which I founded. And basically we have American students come to Uruguay and work alongside agroecological producers. And for me, it's a sort of way to lift up these producers as teachers, as experts, as, sort of demonstrating sustainable livelihoods. And then I sort of use that as an educational model, an experiential education model to get people to understand what maybe a low carbon life is like. And so that's relevant, I think, information for this conversation. Maybe Trace, you can talk a little bit about Roots Down, and then we'll have Sean introduce himself and explain a bit about his work.
All right. Yeah, we're doing a little bit of popcorn here. Yeah, I work at Roots Down. We are working to shift the paradigm of landscaping on public land. So, right now, most of the public land is just mow and blow, fescue and Bermuda grasses is almost as bad as cement for water runoff and soil erosion and pesticide use. So we're trying to get them to switch over to food forestry and pollinator gardens to really kind of help I like to say, bring the farm into the city. So it's kind of sort of nature and the farm is all around us, and really kind of blur that line between urban and rural. Yeah, I guess popcorn, Sean. Tell us about what you're doing.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, and nice to meet you both. Both of those initiatives sound very interesting. I'd like to hear more about that. Yeah, a bit about me. My name's Sean, from New Jersey. I used to be a woofer about 4 or 5 years, traveling around the world, working on farms. Actually, I wanted to do what Trace does, which is to, just start transitioning land into something useful, productive in my home state. But I kind of became disillusioned with that. New Jersey, just suburbs, malls. There's some land over there that's fenced off. I don't even know if I'm allowed in it. No idea what's going on with that. So I left the country. That's why I started traveling, woofing, and just basically trying to see as many different projects as I could. I hope your listeners are familiar with WOOF, WWOOF. So basically go online, look at a map of all the different farms that are participating, and you contact them. Well, you find the ones you want to go to. I would always search either ecosystem restoration or reforestation or regenerative agriculture to find farms that are working in those fields. Then you just write them up and say, hey, I want to come volunteer. And so it's a low cost way to travel, because they cover your costs and you just work for them in exchange for that. So I did that in about 6 countries, 35 farms. That's how I ended up in Guatemala. That was farm number 35. I showed up at a farm in Livingston, Guatemala, with the plan to continue south to Panama, or who knows. But I ended up staying on there. I ended up staying on as manager. There's a bamboo farm primarily. And that's also where I met the woman there working on so I was planting the bamboo, managing the plantations, doing polycultures. And a woman who's now my wife was there using the bamboo for construction. She's an architect, Nikte. And so now I live here. That was 4 years ago. I arrived in Guatemala. So I stayed on as manager. Meanwhile, I founded the nonprofit Contour Lines Corps, which I could explain a bit about. And then while working on that farm, I started applying those same models into communities. little by little, next thing you know, we work in 69 different communities around the country, which is great. It'll be probably over 100 by the end of this year. Right now we have 1,100 families that have projects, which is going to be over 2,000 by the end of this year. And yeah, it's just been a very slow, actually quite fast, exponentially increasing learning experience, starting off just making all the mistakes you can imagine, but little by little improving the models through that. And now, yeah, we have a contract to plant 500,000 trees this year.
Wow.
And yeah, that's a brief introduction.
Yeah, congratulations, Sean. I just want to highlight for the listeners and viewers that right now we have someone from New Jersey, Illinois, and Michigan who now live in Atlanta, Uruguay, and Guatemala. So this is like a truly kind of like global call we have going on right now.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk a bit about the name of the organization, because it's taken from kind of your fundamental agricultural lens, so if you could kind of talk about contour lines, what that means, how that's been a foundation for the actual physical work that you do.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good question. So why contour lines? Well, on the agricultural side, it's a method that pretty much forms the backbone of these systems planted on contour. We use mostly Glyveris of the Caribbean. You can just cut a branch off a tree, stick it in the ground, and it resprouts, grows very quickly, fixes nitrogen, provides shade, and lots of biomass, mulch for the trees. So, and it's also very simple because as we're marking the lines with an A level, the stakes that we use to mark it are these same Glyveris sepium stakes. So we're designing the site and then also growing these living terraces, basically, because we're on very steep lands around Livingston, like 45-degree angles or more, a lot of them, and very, very heavy rainfall, wet tropics, 4,400 millimeters of rain a year. So the practices that are used widely in the communities there, slash and burn, essentially all soil gets washed away. You got to leave it fallow for a year or two to rebuild that layer, which happens actually very quickly in the climate. But then it just gets washed away again. So with these lines, all that soil accumulates in the lines and builds up over time as we're planting annuals along them for production and chopping and dropping those legumes for mulch. So it's one method. It's very simple. And what it does is once the participants take on these projects, they've essentially converted that land into more or less a permanent, which is the trick, as long as they continue to see the value in those agroforestry sites, which can bring us into other subjects. But as long as they see that value, it's pretty much a permanent site that's designed on contour. The roads will be on contour. All the annuals in between will be on contour. And so it's one method that transitions land. It's also one method that's measurable, literally in meters or feet for you gringos out there. So that's an easy way to track our progress. And yeah, it's just a simple method, which is key. So what I do is I go into a community. Now it's mostly by word of mouth. Communities ask me to come in. So I'll do a meeting, I explain the rules. And we do have rules. It's a very strict contract. I don't believe in charity. I believe in grants. These are work grants. So you have to follow the rules, which are apply these methods. But it's very simple. We have 3 rules: plant the legumes on contour, mulch the crops, and don't use chemicals. So and contour lines is kind of the backbone of that because it forms the mulch, it creates the mulch, it's the legume, and it shades out weeds so you don't need chemicals. It improves fertility so you don't need pesticides. And yeah, contour lines, it's just keeping it simple because yeah, that's one of the things I've learned, which I could go into.
Wait,
But
say
yeah,
that
that's
last line
counterline.
again. You broke up for that last line. What was the last thing you just said?
I believe it was that you have to keep it simple, very
Oh yeah.
simple with these projects. So that's why it's
Um,
just contour lines. So the name could be contour lines and polyculture and organic farming and integrating animals, all these things. But no, it's just contour lines, and
I
that's
like that.
to kind of symbolize the simplicity, which is very important.
So for people who are like completely new to this idea, I think I'll just repeat back what I understand is happening. And I'm relatively new to this whole like contour lines, or I think people have called it key line or earthworks, like basically moving the earth in such a way so that when rain falls, it catches the rain, and the plants planted in the basically little swales or little mini hills, the plants that are planted there are catching the rain and then soaking it up, and it's helping the plants grow, and then the roots of the plants are obviously holding the soil in place better. I saw an example of this, and I've invited this guy on to come talk about it. Neil Spackman is his name. He did this around Mecca, where it was like, I don't know if you're familiar with this guy, Sean, but
Yeah.
he like basically turned like rocks, desert into a functioning ecosystem, because basically the
Mhm.
water was just running down the mountain and straight into the sea. And so just moving the earth enough and planting in strategic places, not only can support vegetation, but then build soil health, build soil quality, build soil over time. And like you were saying with Sean, when you chop some of the foliage and drop it down there, that also helps to build up the soil, but with this organic material and sequester carbon. I'm just repeating back, maybe in simpler terms, maybe not, but just for people to kind of wrap their heads around what's going on here. I find this kind of methodology extremely exciting, and because I think it's simple. It's a form of regenerative agriculture that can be practiced depending on context around the world. And there's just so many multiple benefits. So another thing I'm curious about is like, okay, so I don't know, help me like situate me to these people and these farms that you're working on. Like, okay, you're going into a community. What are they you said they do like slash and burn type agriculture before. Why are they coming to you? What have they heard? And then once they do your process, like where is the funding coming from? Where like the work grants funding coming from? You said you have like a contract for how they do it. How does that work over time? What are they using the land for before and after? Is it the same things, or are they shifting? That kind of stuff. I would be curious to know how that all works.
All right. Wow, it's a lot of questions all in one.
Or maybe
Let's
just
see.
talk me through like one community. What is it like? Why are they coming to you? Talk me
Okay.
through what it's like when you go and have your meeting, and then when you start doing the work, and then what are they doing afterwards? Like walk me through the process.
All right. So the communities we work with are primarily, so we work in different parts of the country now, but the majority of our projects are on the Caribbean coast and the highlands above it, they're indigenous. Kekchi is the indigenous group. Around Livingston, where we have about half of all of our work so far, and about 30 communities we work with. That's where I started. They are mostly refugees that fled from the highlands around Coban during the Civil War of Guatemala. So a lot of the communities are very, very remote. They basically arrived in the jungle, cut out a patch, and started growing corn. And yeah, I don't like to present my work it has a whole socioeconomic side, obviously, the benefits of the work, but I like to focus on the land restoration, like soil conservation, basically reforestation. So, but I mean, obviously it does also address like food insecurity, helps develop income, improves nutrition, all that kind of thing. But yeah, focus on the soil conservation side. And that's how I present it to the communities. So how we work with the community is first I'll arrive, do a meeting, everybody gets together, I explain the projects and the contracts that I would sign with each person who decides to take on the project. About a week later, we come back and mark the contour lines. And then 2 months later, when planting season comes, we deliver the fruit trees and plant them. So it's very simple to get involved. We don't do like lots of classes and talking and meetings. I believe in getting work done. And then after the trees are planted, then we follow up with bringing annuals, doing training sessions on the land with like pruning, pest control, and also supervising. So that's another round of visits. We have technicians, local guys that I employ to do this work. They also go back and supervise each site to make sure that they're following those required methods and providing any other assistance needed. So yeah, what do you have a more question?
No, yeah, I get
about other stuff.
I'd be curious, where is your grant funding coming from? You are a nonprofit, so you're soliciting grant funds from other foundations or something like that?
Yeah, good question. So the funding, that's been like an evolution of. So it started the very first pilot site outside of that farm I worked on. Basically paid it out of pocket. From that site, the 3 guys that I hired as workers there, that were kind of training. The next planting season, 6 months later, Don, Carlos, Eugenio, and Victor of Tatin Village, the first village where we started working, they became these workers from the pilot site. They became the first 3 guys to plant their own sites on their own land in their village. And that was done through a crowdfunding campaign that we launched, which mostly just equated to bothering my friends and family on Facebook asking for money. So I got about $3,000 to do that first round of projects. Then we did about 2 or 3 more seasons successively of crowdfunding. And then little by little, once people started seeing the results, we started getting larger supporters. So we had ecosystem restoration camps, like our first partner. They raised like, I think 8,000 for us to expand into 3 more villages around Livingston. That was winter of 2019, early 2020. Then we just started getting a lot of people that were interested. So I did a lot of social media, which I don't like doing, but it's necessary. Just making Facebook posts and all that stuff, and writing to people. But yeah, now fortunately we're at the point where we have a tree planting organization. They pay per tree. We have a contract to plant 500,000 trees with them. So that's where we are now. But yeah, it's been a very long step-by-step process to improve that. I've done like grant writing, video editing, like maintain the website, all that stuff. But stuff that should now be contracted out, delegated to other folks, hopefully.
Yeah.
I'll let you go, Trace, but I just want for Sean's information, something we've been really trying to interrogate is like what organizations are involved in what I guess like ecological initiatives, and the devil's in the details. And so we're talking to this weekend this man named Gregory Landua, who runs an organization called Regen Network that basically uses like crypto for. And so I don't know anything about the details of that. And I think it's really important to interrogate, like, who are the organizations paying for what, and then what's actually happening on the ground. Because I think we're probably in a moment where there's a lot of amazing people doing amazing things, and then some people grifting or saying they're doing something and not really doing what they're saying. And I'm extremely I think it's just important to bring that information out into the light and to really talk about it. So thanks for explaining the details there. Trace, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I think you're kind of, kind of a lead into the question I was curious about, is, and this is actually a question that we're actively working on here at Roots Down, is that what you're doing, right, has enormous economic value for the area, right? And the soil retention, beyond the food, right? Beyond the food that could be produced and sold at market, just the regeneration of the land. Whenever you have steep hillsides and a potential for water runoff, you've got landslides and various other natural disasters that can come along with it. You're helping stop that or reduce the likelihood of that. Have you given you? I got to tell you, I was blown away at the stats on the website. Like, the efficiency with which you've managed to do all of this is just astounding. So my hat's off to you on that. Have you been trying to, or given any attention to, quantifying the economic, or like in dollar terms or in financial terms, the value beyond just the market value of the crops if they get sold at market?
You mean like the ecological benefits of this type of work?
Yeah, like there's a dollar price you could put on sequestering carbon, on limiting soil erosion, water runoff, the jobs you're creating. You're creating, I would assume, potentially good paying jobs for people. There's all these benefits to what you're doing. And the reason why I ask is I just want to add some context, is I think that one of the main arguments that always get pushed back for us at Roots Down is always, mowing and blowing seems so economically efficient, right? But it's only because they're like very narrowly defining the economic efficiency of it, right? They're not considering carbon emissions. They're not considering, soil degradation, or what poisoning our waterways, or the increased levels of asthma that lawn care maintenance crews have from breathing in fumes all day. Like, they're not incorporating any of that. And so I'm kind of curious if you're putting any kind of effort into that, or if you're just too busy putting trees in the ground to focus on that side of
it. That's a very good question. I think that's key to the stuff happening on a larger scale. So it seems like most of our supporters is kind of, it's good enough that we're planting trees where there was slash and burn. So it's to have that information, that data, like, how do you quantify, the amount of rainwater absorption and the reduction of the drought flood cycle, increase in biodiversity. So I really don't know how to quantify. We've done studies to get kind of data, like the improvement in plant biodiversity from these sites. For example, the pilot site versus the pasture next door, which the pilot site used to be pasture. So I did a study where you mark off a meter at random. You pick a few square meters and just count the amount of plant species in that meter, and then do the same thing on the other side of the fence. Take the average. So in the pasture, there were 4 plants per square meter on average. On the agroforestry side, it was 13. So that's 325% increase. I also did soil studies off to the lab where so it was about the same proportion, about 4% soil organic matter in the pasture. On the agroforestry side, it was between 8 and 12%. And this is just over about a year and a half or 2 years. Same thing, measuring the soil horizons. So the A horizon, which is the organic matter, you can just dig down and you can see the depth of it because it's like blacker, Mm-hmm. So on the pretty much same thing. On the pasture side, it was only like 3-4 inches. On the agroforestry side, it was 12 inches. So there are ways to quantify it. But like I said, it seems like just enough that we're planting trees as far as a lot of our supporters are concerned. but that's been a major initiative of mine. A major goal is to actually get folks that study these things, you know, like, for example, just a basic comparison, like mulch this fruit tree, don't mulch that one, see the difference. It would be very easy to do. Also, all the socioeconomic benefits, like what you mentioned, like how it brings jobs, how it reduces the amount of imports and, you know, processed chemical garbage that people spend all their money on, because that's all that there is there in the stores, you know, reducing that, replacing it with locally produced food. So yeah, I really need people to come study that. If you know of anyone, send them on down.
Do you,
Yeah.
is there I wonder if there's a savory hub. Is there a savory hub anywhere near you?
That's key. But well, there is one that is, not that I know if I could try to look that up.
Yeah, they're a pretty good
one
organization. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the one thing that is becoming popular these days is carbon credits. And that is, you know, that's all the talk. Everyone I talk to is like, oh, we'll get you a carbon credit deal. We've talked with maybe like 10 different organizations that offer that. They'll measure it for you and then sell the credit, bring income. And I'm on the verge of deciding that it's really more trouble than it's worth. And it's not, I don't think it's been established yet as something that's hopefully will be there. But also other ecosystem services, yeah, the value should be placed on that, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear your critique or experience talking to people about the carbon credit thing, because I tend to be kind of a Luddite, and I tend to be somebody who's skeptical of how data gets used. Like, so for example, how much onus are we putting on people to like measure all of these things to just prove their worth to us, kind of thing, you know? And how much, I mean, sometimes it's good to have things measured so that you can prove that there's something happening, but then on the same time, like, it takes a lot of energy to do that. And in my opinion, it's can sometimes be a big burden to put on people, to just be measuring X, Y, and Z all the time, or to prove that their ecosystem is better by our parameters, for example. And so that doesn't mean that it's bad to measure in general, but I'd be super curious to hear your critique. Like, what I think the carbon credit thing is pretty nascent. It's coming, it's like just coming into its own. And so maybe the people are working on it, are figuring it out, and thinking about these things in more depth. But I'd be curious to know, like, your experience, what have those conversations been like, and what are your what are your misgivings?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Don't be shy.
So
Don't
I mean,
shy.
like you said, it's nascent.
Be honest here.
So we will revisit it, of course, when it becomes better established. But so the main challenges that we've seen so far, one is a matter of scale, because like you said, it's costly to do the studies and the verification in order to sell the credit. So most of these companies are like, if you're less than 1,000 hectares, we're not even it's not even worth the trouble, which then leads to basically like, who are the people benefiting from it then? It's large scale landowners. So like the small holders that we work with, they're basically just on the principle of it, they're just excluded right off the bat. So that's part of it. Another part is, yeah, also on that same theme of having landowners. So a lot of these communities we work with are in the process of legalizing. A lot of them are very recent invasions, actually. They call them invasions, when a group of indigenous come and basically squat on some rich guy's farm that he doesn't even use. But fortunately, they mostly do gain rights. A lot of the communities we work with have successfully invaded and now have rights to the land. A lot of them are still in the process. But yeah, in terms of carbon credits, then, so they won't accept anyone who doesn't have the full title yet. Also, then there's that issue of, how do we as intermediaries bring that carbon credit money to the community, or how do we get the community to so what I've heard, critique, and I can't verify this, but a lot of nonprofits a lot of the larger NGOs that work with communities are very suspected, I'll say, among locals, that they're just making lots of carbon credit money off of their land and not delivering it to the communities. And that's what it seems like. It's very strange. Like, I've talked with carbon credit companies that are basically like, yeah, show us where the land is and we'll give you the money, like, to me. And then, but what about them? Like, it's strange. And so that's another reason why I don't even want to get involved with that at this stage. And the tree planting funding at this stage seems to be enough, as well as the value adding and marketing of the harvests. It's just a more sure thing.
Yeah, I think you know, it's like, it's something that definitely makes sense in theory, right? Is that, like, you know, the current money system, money is created when it's lent into existence, right? People take out loans, and then money is created that way and circulates in the economy. So it makes sense, like, in theory, that you could switch it to a different type of, you know, money is created when carbon is sequestered, right? Proof of carbon sequestering, money is created. There is some, you know, that's what makes the carbon credit market so important, right? Because the reason why you can lend money into existence is because there's a secondary market for selling that debt, right? Because you're paying that debt back. Where with carbon, the theory, right, is that, like, if you're a carbon sequesterer, you're never paying that money back, right? I mean, it's not a two-way street, right? There's no interest gained from that. And I think there's, you know, that's a pretty important piece, right? That's missing right now, or isn't operating at scale. But it seems, in theory, it makes sense. I mean, Roots Down is definitely looking at the same thing. Is like, you know, what we're doing is a fundamental social good. You know, we're a for-profit, so we're trying to prove that a business can make it as a business, doing essentially unequivocal good in society. And it's, I mean, it's a tricky space. We've already had to, you know, kind of acknowledge that we need a nonprofit wing, right? There's just so many cash flows on the nonprofit side that we're just completely locked out of as a for-profit. They'll be like, we love your mission, we love what you're doing, but we can't grant to you because our mission states we have to give to nonprofits, right? So, you know, we're operating, you know, we're going to have to kind of operate two wings in order to make that work. So I'm fascinated about what's the maturity of the plants that you're planting? Like, how long does it take to kind of start producing fruit and food for the community?
That's a good question. So the kind of the productive backbone of these sites are the fruit trees. That's basically how we incentivize folks, kind of to go back to Ashley's question beginning, by offering fruit trees. We say we'll give you up to 100 fruit trees. Some are going up to 150, 200 fruit trees per family. And that alone is the incentive, because they're grafted. We buy them from a local nursery. Actually, that's about 80% of our project costs go to this local nursery of ours, Frutas del Mundo. So by offering these fruit trees, I mean, these are families that they're campesinos. They understand that a fruit tree produces and that buying grafted fruit trees is expensive. So that's how we incentivize the projects. We'll give you 10 trees if you follow the methods. If all goes well, next season you get 50. So that's basically our expansion model. And that's how we incentivize this work. What was the question?
You're essentially paying in fruit trees, right? They're you know,
right.
Or is there money also for the workers?
So we don't give. That's one thing we learned the hard way. The first few projects in Tatin, we would pay not the guy receiving the trees, but a few helpers. We'd pay their days. And we realized that that's just not a good way to work. So basically, I read the book 2 Ears of Corn by Roland Bunch, which, if you're involved in this kind of work at all, development work, it's a must read. If you're not reading it, like I was at first, or if you haven't read it, you should probably step back and read it, because there's a chance you're doing more harm than good. And we saw that happen in the first community, paying people paying the helpers, like, oh, there's pigs getting in here. Okay, we'll buy you barbed wire. Also, we didn't have the expansion at the time. It was just, here, have 100 trees all at the same time. And that's what that is called paternalism. Which, I mean, there's a whole book about why it's bad, but in short, it doesn't, well, one, it doesn't kind of inspire participation from the best interested folks. You just get folks who want whatever they hand out, they can get out of it. And also it's not empowering. It's saying like, hey, you're poor, we feel bad for you. Here, take this, you know, pat on the back. So and also it creates dependence as well. So we've really seen that. So now it's give as little as possible and be strict, require that people follow the rules or implement the methods, the regenerative methods, the contour lines in order to receive trees. And that, yeah, we've just seen so much better results. One of the many things we've learned. But sorry, what was the question before that?
I didn't ask that question, but you answered it really, really well. I mean, you answered a question that we would have gotten to eventually. So I think that's great. I mean, you know, I think that one thing that me and Ashley are both kind of driving at is sort of the economics of it all. Like how is it functioning? It's clearly a functioning marketplace, right? You've created a functioning marketplace, and we're just kind of curious about the mechanics of it. But it sounds like you know, the contract is, I will give you a long-term source of food, right? And potentially market food you can sell to the market as well, a source of income. But, you know, the exchange here is that you need to work it in such a way that that's best for everybody, for your organization and for the community. I think it's beautiful. You're teaching people to fish instead of giving them the fish, right? And I think that is, I mean, it's a beautiful way to do it. I was kind of, the training piece, right? Education is so important, right? Because we're talking about paradigm shift. You're talking about a change in the relationship to the land. How is the training? Is there a formalized training process, or is it mostly just hands-on? That, you know, you plant enough trees, you work on enough trees, you figure it out?
That's a good question. So yeah, training is key, and it is mostly hands-on. Sometimes we'll do it's called charla in Spanish. I don't even know, like a workshop, I guess you could say, where we bring representatives from all the communities to come to the pilot site. And we'll do like pruning, chopping, dropping, some organic spraying, and that's a way of training. But mostly it's just people implementing the methods on their own lands. So I mentioned the contract is 3 rules. Those are the agricultural rules: the legumes, the mulch, and the no chemicals. We also have recently added. We're always improving the model. We added 2 organizational rules as well to the contract. So there's 5 now. So number 4 is you have to include women. Every contract has, you know, the husband and the wife have to sign it, and they all have to be involved. And the 5th one is that the community has to organize itself for practical reasons. Like, you know, everyone, if we have a day where, you know, the trees arrive, everyone has to show up, or the technician comes to mark the contour lines with everyone. Everyone has to show up so that, and it's practical reasons, because you can't just go to each individual person. So you have to appoint a representative. Each community has to have that representative, which is organized. It's great practice for the future when we start forming cooperatives to market the stuff. But it's very key to the training, to answer your question. So we send a technician, and everyone gets together, and the technician marks the contour lines, designs the sites with the participants.
How many technicians do you have right now?
So full-time, we have 4 in Livingston, where most of the projects are. We have in total about 15 around the country, because each new region we work in has 1 or 2 folks that have kind of just risen up out of their own interests to become leaders, which is pretty fascinating. And about like 5 or 6 in training part-time guys that we call on. And that's basically come out of just expanding, and for very practical reasons. We're not an organization with a whole lot of, or any overhead money just to hire a person. I've noticed that a lot of the big nonprofits, they just have a guy on salary who doesn't do anything most of the day. So that's not how we work. We now have full-time guys because there's enough communities in that area where they can work every day throughout the year.
Yeah, that's cool. The thing that is always interesting to me, like my sociological interest, is these networks you're building. You're building, like, you know, networks of technicians, and then practitioners, you know, farmers who are doing it, and then just the process of them getting to know one another in the project itself is will yield, all to speak in like financial terms, yield dividends. Like, you know, these people are gonna start talking to each other and get to know each other, and then start sharing tips and tricks, and then maybe start working on economic things together. And, oh, I've been selling my fruit at this market, and this has been working for me, and this kind of thing. So I think to me, it's always the human capital, as you know, they call it, that's really, really cool, because it's not just the one fruit tree or the several fruit trees on the land. It's like the, you know, the innovation that comes, and the social cultural shifts that are happening, which is really cool. I'd be super curious to hear a little bit about this love story. You're meeting your wife and how that all happened. I think it just to try to I think wrap our head around, like, you're just a guy from the US who's traveling around and kind of maybe just exploring the world a bit, world travels, and then now all of a sudden you're like going to a place and living there, and you know, I want to hear about this human side of the story.
Well, my wife's coming over now. She
oh,
can
nice.
explain
Okay.
part of it. So yeah, I was just a dude who saw that in my home country it's very hard to plant on land unless you have $1 million to buy a piece. So that's why I traveled around a lot to do that. And yeah, so part of why I stayed in this country, part of it is because I met McDay here. Say hello.
Hey.
Oh my gosh, you have a baby belly.
Yeah.
Wow. Hola. ¿Hablas inglés también?
Yes, I do speak English.
Okay, good. So good to meet you. We want to hear your love story.
I want to tell her love story.
Tell a love story. I have to tell it?
Yeah. I guess we tell it together.
Yeah. So I went to work in a farm he works
in Livingston.
That it was a bamboo farm, and I went there to design structures and construct with the bamboo. My dad was also part of the project, helping with the administration things and with the bamboo treatment. My dad is also a designer and an engineer. So I went there as the architect to work there. And then what? And we had at some point problems I was like on the board of the project. We decided to get voluntaries to try to improve the work. Didn't work, by the way. We were receiving work awares to help.
We phased that out pretty quickly.
Yeah. So in one of the trips that I was there, it was like filled with voluntaries. The thing that I was sort of in charge to oversee what they were doing and to make them useful.
Yeah.
And Sean appeared as one of them.
So he was useful. The other ones weren't, but he was useful.
Oh yeah, we actually offered him the job of the manager of the agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kicked everybody out.
But he stayed.
Yeah, he was the only one who stayed, and he actually stayed there, like living on the farm. He was like living on the farm in charge of the agriculture. That it was like a maybe more developed department because he was planting the bamboo. There's we got a bunch of workers in charge, like and that.
She's the heifer.
And then we get out of there because
we left that farm. Now
Yeah,
we
we
focus
left.
on the nonprofit.
Yeah.
So now she's the boss of the whole value adding initiative. So to talk about, I know Trace, both of you mentioned like the economic side of it. So that's also a way to incentivize these people to adopt the projects and also to maintain them. And that's what Nick Day does. Is we buy the harvests every week. We get a shipment from these communities. And what do you do with the harvest?
We preserve them. We want to do like sustainable methods and realistics of preserving them to teach the families. And that's it. Teach the families how to preserve the harvest. They don't have to sell it all at once when it's gonna get brought and get screwed in the prices. But to process it, give it more value, and being able to preserve it, also to being able to ship it to here, because it's not always doable, the shipment of some products that they have like a life of a week or something. So we value add them here. We have a worker now working full time. Actually, this week her daughter is joining the team.
So I have 2 workers.
So you're gonna have
And what are some of the products you make?
We have some chucrut or sauerkraut. We have sauces, like chutney sauces, spicy sauces, marmalade, like jarred stuff. They're all like pretty stable. They don't need to be fridged or anything. They have like a long duration. And we do flowers of the tuberculous,
like cassava flower,
camote,
sweet potato,
and
taro.
Yeah, there's ñames and malangas, some other tubercles. From here,
so I wonder how has it been, like the cultural side of things? Has Sean been able to adapt to the local culture? Have you helped to give him the tips and tricks and to sort of learn to be a, does he bring his Yankee perspective to Guatemala, or is he shifting a bit over time? I'm curious.
Yankee means gringo.
Yeah, no, he had a bunch of his Yankees over here.
Oh yeah, and here just so you know, I'm here in Uruguay. I'm an American in Uruguay. They say Yankee here instead of gringo.
Yeah, here we call them gringos. But
Yeah.
you're already there. You're drinking mate and everything.
I've adapted. So I'm wondering how's Sean period of adaptation going?
I think he's adapting too. Here they eat, like the locals, they eat tortillas. There is some corn stuff that they eat with every meal. He loves tortillas more than everybody.
It's gluten free.
Yeah, he's pretty adapted to the things. He has some trouble always understanding us a little bit, some things. You know how we Latins, we're more like we express more things, and we talk more, and we put more flavor and stuff. And he's more like a cold Yankee for some stuff.
Yeah, it takes some time. Like here, everybody you give a besito every single time you see somebody, and every time you leave. And that's just like when I'm at a party, for example, and there's like 30 people there, I'm like, am I supposed to go around and give every single person a besito before I leave? This is my train of thought.
Depends on the type of party. Yeah, and also like here, when you talk to somebody first, you ask how they're doing, how their mother is doing, how everything is going, if they're fine and everything, and then you talk about business. So also in every single call, in calls and that, and you send like saludos for people.
I
You
like
don't go,
to I
yeah,
get
you
right
don't,
down to business.
yeah,
You
you
go
don't call
straight to
straight
business.
to, yeah, you don't
Yeah.
call straight to talk about business. It's super rude.
I know, I have to remember that too. When I send text messages, you have to start with like, how are you? How's the family? And before you ask any business related questions. So Sean, how is
Yeah.
your story of adaptation been from your perspective?
I think it's gone well. I lived in, so before this whole journey I'm on now, I taught in Korea, South Korea for 6 years. And yeah, since I was 18, I'm 36 now. Yeah, so that's half my life I've lived outside the US. So yeah, it's not hard to fit in, or to at least not create problems. Yeah, I don't know, that's all I'll say on that subject.
Yeah, I think I'll say something, and from my perspective, which is I think a lot of people talk a lot about like cultural adaptation and being respectful. And I mean, I've traveled a lot. I traveled to like 35 countries working in different farms before settling in Uruguay. And you just need to be a nice person. I mean, you just need to be respectful and thoughtful, and to try not to come in with all your own perspectives, but instead to be respectful of what the local way of doing things is, and to not like, force yourself on anyone, or force your perspective on anyone. So it's not really rocket science, I don't think. I mean, you do have to be thoughtful. That's been my perspective. Trace, I'm sorry, I don't know if you have it.
Okay.
No, I mean, I've lived in the US my whole life. I don't I don't have much to offer to this conversation. But what is this your y'all's first child?
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
He's due in a couple weeks.
Oh my God.
Or any day.
Yeah, any day from now, he's supposed to be almost done.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so exciting.
That's really
and
beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and one thing we talk a lot about in our podcast, we had a whole episode just on parenting, because I think for us, part of the thing is the act of creating something, the act of, despite all of the challenges in the world, the act of creation and making something worth working on. And it seems like you're doing that in work and family too. So I think that's really cool, really exciting. What else do we want to know about contour lines, Trace?
Well, I mean, where are you going? I mean, you got 500,000 trees you got to plant. So I imagine you're going to be out there planting a lot of trees pretty soon, right?
Yeah, so we're expanding into hopefully 2 more countries, Belize and Honduras, our neighbors, this year. We have projects in the US as well. The co-founder and a good friend of ours who's here now somewhere, Thomas Leonard, in South Carolina and North Carolina, the west of the states. And yeah, just expanding a lot more in this country, while also kind of developing this initiative that Nicté's working on, the value-added processing and the marketing. We're also selling bamboo furniture now, bamboo that's treated in these communities, harvested and treated. And that's just 2022. And we're looking at 5 million trees for 2025.
Woo!
Wow.
I'm curious. I'm curious to know, like, okay, so your average person who's listening to this is like, just probably a white collar person who's just listening to podcasts and trying to get their head around all the different things that exist in the world. How does somebody begin to take a step toward supporting something like what you're doing? Like, should people start thinking about planting fruit trees in their own yard? Should they start doing similar kind of initiatives in their own community? Like, what steps and advice do you have for people to figure out, like, how do they get involved? How do they start doing, good work and related work?
That's a really good question. So one thing I want to say in optimism I think it's Doomer Optimism, is that
Yeah, Doomer Optimism.
is that like anyone can do this, really. I mean, how to do it, I'm not gonna lie, there's a little white privilege involved. I had some savings from my past career, and I'm just able to travel anywhere with a US passport, so that's part of it. But it's really like I never majored in I majored in history. Like I never studied nonprofit management or any like social media or finance, any of the stuff I do. I basically just learned it. As it became a need, I just did what I had to do. So it's really, really, really possible. And I'd say to anyone who's in like finance or any kind of office work that isn't fulfilling, just get out of it. I mean, it might be hard for some people, but I'm serious. Like it's killing you. I was dying when I was trying to live in the US. After Korea, I tried to live there. So I'll share something. So I suffered a lot from, like, I guess the yuppie flu they used to call it, like chronic fatigue. I saw so many doctors trying to figure out, like, why am I tired all the time? I can't function. I can't socialize. I'm missing out on so much because of this like illness, I guess. And that was only cured by me starting this nonprofit and doing what I like to do, doing what I find meaningful. And I hope that people who don't have that yet can just take that step and do it, because why not? You're just gonna waste away unless you do it. What do you got to lose?
I love that. That there couldn't be a more Doomer optimist message. I mean, honestly, it's just find the thing that makes, you know, that you're passionate about, that makes you want to get up in the morning, basically, and do it, and go out there and make some change. Yeah. The stuff in the Carolinas, is there any way for people who live near there to get involved in those projects? Just go to your website, or?
Yeah, you can reach out to us on the website that goes to our Controlines Gmail, controlines.core Gmail. You can contact us, or you can get in touch with Thomas Leonard, who's the one managing that branch of Controlines, or I could put you in contact with him. And
is it a similar kind of setup, or does it differ at all in the US, the work you do in the US?
So that's one thing we're starting to figure out, is how to apply these same models to the US. You know, obviously it's going to be different with price. The prices of everything are totally different. The incentives then are going to have to be different. But I think more or less a lot of the concepts are going to apply. And I think, yeah, we should just do it. I think people should do this kind of stuff on their land or find land. I love what Tracy's doing, trying to put land into the hands of people, because like actually, interestingly, USAID has been supporting a lot of, national nonprofits that do the legal side of helping communities get their land. And that's crucial, because without that, we wouldn't be able to do any of this work. I think I saw an article in Ohio, there was like a homestead act. They were granting state land to some families to try homesteading. Someone should look that up, see what happened. If it works, replicate it. But yeah, just people need to have access to land. That's important. But I also want to say, as far as like how anyone can do this, is that don't be scared that it's gonna fail horribly in the beginning. Like our work was horrible. Looking back on it, it was such a waste of money. But you just got to do it. It doesn't matter. And now I'm to the point where I look forward to finding problems, because I look forward to going into a situation that could end horribly, because that's how you learn. And now it excites me, and we've learned so much from that. And that's what our success, I think, is based on a lot, and learning from the mistakes of others, of course. So read 2 Ears of Corn by Roland Bunch.
That sounds great. I mean, I think unless you have another question, Trace, we can wrap it up there.
No, this has been absolutely lovely. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Nite, for your lovely story. This has been tremendous.
Thank you.
Awesome.
It was nice meeting you guys.